The Federal Reserve Heist, 72 Hours in Florence ADX. If you're watching this, you're about to witness one of the most dangerous criminal operations ever attempted on American soil. Before we begin, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because what you're about to hear will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the perfect crime. Let's dive in. The fluorescent lights of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York hummed at exactly 3:47 a.m. when the first alarm should have triggered. It didn't. 80 feet below street level, in a vault that had remained impenetrable since 1924, 6 figures moved through the darkness like shadows given human form. They wore no masks, carried no weapons, and left no fingerprints. This wasn't a crime of desperation. This was a masterpiece 18 months in the making. His name was Dr. Marcus Webb, but in the underground circles of elite criminals, he was known only as the Architect. A former economics professor from MIT who had published 3 books on financial systems and global banking security, Webb had spent 15 years teaching the brightest minds in America how money moved through the world. Then one day he simply vanished. That was 2 years ago. The FBI had no idea where he went. They should have been looking much closer to home. Webb stood in the center of the vault, his salt and pepper hair illuminated by the glow of a tablet screen. Around him, his crew worked with surgical precision. There was Elena Kowalski, a tunnel engineer who had built subway systems in 7 countries. Next to her, David Chin, a former NSA cybersecurity specialist who could crack any digital lock ever created. Across the room, twins Marcus and Maya Rodriguez moved gold bars onto a hydraulic lift with the efficiency of machines. And finally, there was James "Ghost" Patterson, a lock specialist so skilled that Interpol had 16 different files on him under 16 different names. They had studied every camera angle, memorized every guard rotation, mapped every blind spot in the building's security grid. Webb had even infiltrated the Federal Reserve as a consultant 6 months prior, wearing a fake credential and a winning smile, planting digital backdoors that would make their entry seamless. The plan was flawless. Almost. What none of them knew was that the Federal Reserve had installed a secondary alarm system 3 weeks earlier, a silent protocol that bypassed the main security grid entirely. It was designed to activate only in the event of vault penetration, sending an encrypted signal directly to the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group. The moment Elena's drill pierced the final layer of reinforced concrete, that signal screamed across encrypted channels to Washington, D.C. By 4:15 a.m., the crew had loaded $200 million worth of gold bars and unmarked bills onto a motorized cart. They were ahead of schedule. Webb allowed himself a rare smile. In 12 minutes, they would slip back through the tunnel Elena had spent 4 months digging from an abandoned subway station 2 blocks away. In 30 minutes, they would disappear into 6 different countries, never to be seen together again. That's when the lights went red. Emergency lockdown protocols sealed every exit simultaneously. Steel barriers, each weighing 4 tons, slammed down over doorways with a sound like thunder. The tunnel entrance collapsed in a controlled explosion of concrete and rebar. Within seconds, the vault transformed from their greatest victory into an airtight tomb. Webb's tablet screen flickered and died. Chen frantically tried to reboot the security override, but every system had gone dark. Maya's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with panic. "We're trapped. Someone knew we were coming." Outside, 43 FBI agents surrounded the building. NYPD's emergency service unit blockaded every street within a 6-block radius. News helicopters circled overhead, their cameras broadcasting live footage to a world that had just woken up to the impossible. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York was under siege. Inside the vault, Webb's expression remained eerily calm. He looked at his crew, then at the fortune surrounding them, then at the reinforced walls that had become their prison. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a strange certainty that sent chills down Elena's spine. "Everything is going exactly according to plan." Chin stared at him in disbelief. "Plan? We're trapped in the most secure vault in America with the FBI outside and no way out. What part of this is the plan?" Webb smiled, a cold, calculated expression that none of them had ever seen before. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document, yellowed with age, marked with a serial number that made Elena's blood run cold. "Tell me something," Webb said quietly, his eyes gleaming in the emergency lighting. "What do you know about prisoner 04475-088? The name meant nothing to them. But in 72 hours, it would mean everything. Because what waited for them in Florence ADX wasn't punishment. It was Phase 2. The standoff began at 4:23 a.m. and became the most watched live event in American history within 6 hours. Every major news network had helicopters circling the financial district. Social media exploded with theories, memes, and conspiracy threads that crashed servers from New York to Los Angeles. The FBI established a command center in a building across the street, and Special Agent Rebecca Moss found herself staring at thermal imaging screens showing 6 heat signatures trapped inside a vault that was supposed to be impossible to breach. Moss had spent 12 years hunting bank robbers, cartel financiers, and white-collar criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. She had never seen anything like this. The crew inside wasn't panicking. They weren't making demands. They weren't negotiating. For the first 18 hours, they didn't communicate at all. That silence terrified her more than any threat could have. Inside the vault, Webb had gathered his crew around the motorized cart loaded with their stolen fortune. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a simmering anger that threatened to boil over. Chen slammed his fist against the steel wall, the impact echoing like a gunshot in the confined space. "You said this was foolproof. You said we'd be in Morocco before sunrise. Instead, we're locked in a tomb with the entire federal government outside." Webb remained seated on a stack of gold bars, that same unsettling calm radiating from him like a force field. "I need you to trust me for 72 more hours. After that, everything will make sense." Elena stepped forward, her engineering mind already calculating oxygen levels and survival time frames. "We have maybe 96 hours of air in here, assuming we don't exert ourselves. The FBI won't wait that long. They'll pump in gas, cut through the walls, or starve us out. We need to negotiate our surrender before this becomes a massacre." "We're not surrendering," Webb said flatly. "We're exactly where we need to be." Maya pulled a pistol from her jacket, the first weapon any of them had carried during the operation. She aimed it directly at Webb's chest. "Start talking, Professor. Right now. Or I swear I'll end this my way." For the first time since the lockdown, genuine emotion crossed Webb's face. Not fear, but something close to sympathy. He stood slowly, making no move to defend himself. "That gun won't help you, Maya. Neither will anger. What I need from all of you is patience and faith in something bigger than this heist." "Faith?" Ghost's voice dripped with contempt. "You trapped us in here. You're either insane or this was a setup from the beginning." Webb walked to the far wall of the vault and pressed his palm against a specific section of reinforced steel. 18 months ago, I received a letter. No return address, no signature, just a single page with a Federal Bureau of Prisons inmate number and a photograph. The inmate is serving 6 consecutive life sentences at ADX Florence, the most secure prison facility in the Western Hemisphere. He's been in solitary confinement for 19 years. His name is Victor Cross, and before his arrest, he was the most successful financial engineer in criminal history. He orchestrated a scheme that moved $4 billion through 17 countries in 6 days. Money that was never recovered. Money that still exists somewhere in the global financial system. The crew exchanged glances. Chin lowered his tablet. "What does that have to do with us?" "Everything," Webb continued. "Victor Cross has cancer. Stage 4 pancreatic. The BOP gives him 6 months, maybe 8. He contacted me because he wants to die free, and he's willing to trade the location of $4 billion for his freedom. But there's a problem. ADX Florence doesn't release inmates. Ever. It's designed to hold the worst of the worst until they die. The only way to extract Victor Cross is from the inside, and the only way to get inside is to commit a crime so spectacular that they send you there." The weight of his words settled over the vault like a suffocating blanket. Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. "You planned for us to get caught." "I planned for us to get sentenced," Webb corrected. "The Federal Reserve heist, The media coverage, the amount stolen, it all guarantees maximum security placement. ADX Florence, where we'll have access to Victor Cross, and where the real operation begins. Marcus finally spoke, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. You used us. We thought we were robbing a bank. You were buying prison tickets. I was buying tickets to $4 billion, Webb shot back. Split 6 ways, that's over 600 million each. Enough to disappear forever, live like kings in countries with no extradition treaties. But only if we survive the next 72 hours and only if you follow my lead when we get inside ADX. Outside, Agent Moss was receiving updates that made her situation exponentially worse. The director of the FBI had arrived from Washington. The Secretary of the Treasury was demanding hourly briefings. The president wanted this resolved before the markets opened Monday morning. The pressure was crushing, and Webb's crew still hadn't made contact. Then, at exactly 2 p.m. on hour 36 of the standoff, the vault's intercom crackled to life. Webb's voice, calm and measured, echoed through the FBI command center. Special Agent Moss, my name is Dr. Marcus Webb. I'd like to discuss the terms of our surrender. Moss grabbed the microphone, her heart racing. Dr. Webb, release the hostages and come out peacefully. We can talk about reducing your sentence. There are no hostages, Webb replied. Just 6 people who made a calculated mistake. We're willing to surrender on one condition. We want it documented, televised, and made part of our federal sentencing record that we cooperated fully and surrendered without violence. It seemed too easy. Moss knew better than to trust easy. Why? Webb's answer sent ice through her veins. Because where we're going, reputation matters. And we want everyone to know we're not violent. We're just very, very smart. 72 hours and 15 minutes after the heist began, 6 figures emerged from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in handcuffs. The media frenzy was deafening. Cameras captured every angle as the most audacious bank robbery in American history ended not with bullets, but with a calculated surrender that felt more like a chess move than a defeat. At his arraignment, Webb smiled for the cameras. He knew exactly which Supermax facility awaited him. He knew exactly who he'd find there. What he didn't know was that Victor Cross had been playing his own game for 19 years, and Webb had just become the final piece on a board far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The judge's gavel fell. ADX Florence. 6 consecutive life sentences. No possibility of parole. Webb's smile never wavered. Phase 2 had officially begun. ADX Florence sits in the high desert of Colorado like a concrete monument to human despair. 340 miles of razor wire surround a facility designed with one purpose: to break the unbreakable. The prison houses 410 inmates, each one considered too dangerous for any other facility in America. Terrorists, cartel leaders, mob bosses, and serial killers exist in 23-hour solitary confinement, locked in 7 by 12-foot cells with walls so thick that screaming accomplishes nothing but damaging your own throat. Marcus Webb arrived on a Tuesday in January, shackled at the wrists, ankles, and waist. The transport van drove through 7 security checkpoints before reaching the intake facility. He was stripped, searched, photographed, and issued a khaki uniform with a number stenciled across the back. Inmate 77643-012. His cell block was Control Unit Alpha, reserved for high-value targets requiring maximum isolation. The guards walked him down a corridor so silent it felt like moving through a tomb. Steel doors lined both sides, each one sealing a human being away from the world. Webb was placed in cell A47, directly across from cell A46. The door slammed shut with a finality that would have crushed most men. Webb simply sat on the concrete bed and waited. Over the next 3 weeks, his crew arrived one by one. Elena in cell block Beta. Chen in Delta. The Rodriguez twins separated into different units entirely. Ghost placed 2 floors below in isolation so complete that he wouldn't hear another human voice for months. The system was designed to destroy criminal networks by ensuring members could never communicate. What the system didn't account for was a plan 19 years in the making. On his 27th day in ADX Florence, Webb heard a voice through the ventilation shaft, distorted but unmistakable. Dr. Webb. I've been expecting you. Victor Cross sounded exactly like his photographs suggested, cultured, precise, and utterly devoid of fear. The man had orchestrated financial crimes that made Webb's Federal Reserve heist look like a convenience store robbery. He'd moved billions through shell corporations, cryptocurrency networks, and diplomatic channels that even the FBI couldn't fully trace. Then he'd made one mistake, trusted one partner too many, and ended up in a 7x12 cell for the rest of his natural life. Mr. Cross, Webb replied, speaking toward the ventilation grate. I held up my end. Now tell me about the $4 billion. Cross's laugh echoed through the ductwork like wind through a canyon. The money is real, Dr. Webb. Hidden in 11 different accounts across 6 continents, each one accessible only through biometric authentication and encryption keys I memorized years ago. But there's something you should know about our arrangement. The $4 billion isn't payment for my freedom. It's payment for something far more valuable. Webb felt ice spreading through his chest. We had a deal. We had the beginning of a deal, Cross corrected. You wanted money. I want out. But getting out of ADX Florence requires more than just willing participants. It requires someone on the outside, someone with resources, connections, and motivation. That someone has been waiting for you to arrive. Before Webb could respond, alarms shrieked through the facility. Red emergency lights flooded every corridor. Guards rushed past his cell in full tactical gear, shouting coordinates and orders into radios. Webb pressed his face against the narrow window slot and saw something impossible, smoke billowing from the administrative wing. The explosion had been small, precise, and strategically placed to disable the prison's central power grid without causing casualties. Backup generators kicked in immediately, but for 47 seconds, every electronic lock in ADX Florence reset to default positions. It wasn't enough time to escape, but it was enough time for something else entirely. Webb's cell door clicked open 3 inches. Across the hall, Cross's door did the same. Throughout the facility, select cells unlocked for less than a minute before emergency protocols resealed them. But in that minute, objects moved through the prison. Notes were passed. Tools were hidden. Messages were delivered to specific inmates in specific locations. When the lockdown ended 4 hours later, the warden ordered a facility-wide search that found nothing. No contraband, no security breaches, no explanation for the explosion beyond a supposed electrical malfunction in a 40-year-old system. The official report would call it an accident. The truth was far more deliberate. That night, Webb found a folded piece of paper wedged into his ventilation grate. The handwriting was immaculate, almost surgical in its precision. Phase 3 begins in 60 days. You will receive instructions through the medical dispensary. Do exactly as told, or everyone you brought here dies. Including you. Your partner on the outside is named Simone Cross. My daughter. She's been planning my extraction since the day I was sentenced. You were never the architect, Dr. Webb. You were always just a tool. Welcome to the real heist. Webb's hands trembled as he read the note a second time, then a third. Everything he'd planned, every calculated risk, every brilliant strategy had been part of someone else's design. Victor Cross hadn't needed rescuing. He'd needed a crew of skilled criminals delivered directly to him, people desperate enough and talented enough to attempt the impossible. 2 floors below, Ghost discovered a similar note in his meal tray. In cell block beta, Elena found one tucked inside a library book she'd requested. Chen received his through a corrupt guard who'd been on Simone Cross's payroll for 7 years. The Rodriguez twins each got notes delivered through separate channels, the messages identical: stay alive. Follow orders. The money is real, but freedom costs more than you imagined. Outside ADX Florence, in a high-rise apartment in downtown Denver, Simone Cross sat before a wall of monitors showing security feeds she'd hacked months earlier. She was 34 years old, a financial crimes investigator for the Treasury Department, and the most patient woman in America. She'd spent 19 years building a network of corrupt officials, sympathetic guards, and criminal contacts, all focused on a single objective: extract her father from the most secure prison on Earth. Webb had been perfect. Brilliant enough to plan the Federal Reserve heist, desperate enough to believe he was in control, and naive enough to think Victor Cross would simply hand over billions without insurance. What Webb didn't know was that Simone had been watching him for 2 years, feeding him information through anonymous channels, guiding him toward the exact crime that would guarantee ADX placement. The real heist wasn't the Federal Reserve. It was breaking her father out of a prison designed to be inescapable, using 6 criminals who thought they were rescuing a dying man for money. In 60 days, the second explosion would come. This one wouldn't be an accident. This one would tear a hole through ADX Florence's outer wall during a carefully orchestrated riot that would leave 37 inmates dead and create exactly 14 minutes of chaos. 14 minutes for Victor Cross to walk out of his cell, through corridors mapped in Simone's mind like a second heartbeat, and into a transport helicopter that would land on the prison's north yard disguised as a medical evacuation. 14 minutes for the crew to realize they'd been used. 14 minutes for Webb to understand that the smartest man in the room had been outplayed from the very beginning. In cell A47, Marcus Webb stared at the concrete ceiling and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine fear. He'd orchestrated the perfect crime, assembled the perfect crew, and executed a plan that should have made him legendary. Instead, he'd walked himself and 5 others into a trap designed by a man who'd been 10 steps ahead for nearly 2 decades. The Federal Reserve heist had never been about money. It had been about delivery. They weren't criminals anymore. They were assets in someone else's masterpiece. And in 59 days, they would either help Victor Cross escape or die trying in a prison riot that Simone was already setting in motion. The scariest part wasn't the danger or the betrayal. It was the realization that somewhere in the darkness of ADX Florence, Victor Cross was smiling, counting down the hours until freedom, knowing that the so-called architect had built nothing but his own cage. The perfect heist was never the one they planned. It was the one they never saw coming. And it was just beginning.